They're not in there, are they?
We're not sure.
Why?
The lab is under attack, the villain is revealed, and we get our first big death in Chapter 8 of Stranger Things Season 2. So let's break it down right here on What Happened. How's it going, you lovely people? Lisa here, and back with another Stranger Things recap, all about the episode titled The Mind Flayer. Now, this is the episode I have been waiting all season for. After the 7th episode felt very slow and out of place a little bit, this episode restored my faith in this season with an action-packed, just like adrenaline rush that felt straight like I was watching a horror movie. Like, my palms were sweating a little, and I loved every second of it. This episode also saw our first major death, so I just gotta take a moment right here to remember good old Bob the Brain, who really is a freaking superhero.
Remember Bob, newbie. Superhero.
Now, I really do love Bob. He's such a good guy, but I honestly wasn't too surprised that he was the death in this episode. It's usually the secondary characters that they kill off. Rest in peace, Barb. But honestly, Bob's death hit me a lot harder than Barb's because we actually had time to kind of get attached to Bob, and he was just a solid good dude. And honestly, without his brain and help with the map and the lab in this episode, who knows if anyone would actually still be alive. So thank you, Bob. You are one of the true heroes of this season. Okay, so now let's move on to the actual episode recap. So the one thing that's really thrown into this episode that seems a bit out of place is near the beginning of the episode when we get a peek into Billy and Max's home life, and just as expected, it is not good. Their parents return home and see that Max has snuck out, that Billy failed as a babysitter, and he is in his room getting ready for a date, complete with putting cologne on his private parts because it's Billy and I wouldn't expect anything less from him. When his dad demands to know where Max is, Billy just says that she's probably at the arcade, but you know what, she's old enough, she doesn't need a babysitter, but his dad's getting mad. But the tipping point is when Billy says she's not his sister. His abusive dad then slams him against the wall and hits him and makes him apologize to his stepmom, among other things, and then tells Billy to cancel his date and go find Max. We don't hear from the storyline for the rest of the episode, which is what makes it feel a little out of place, and it's like, what's the point of it except to tell us that Billy's gonna end up showing up at some point in the finale looking for Max, and I don't think it's gonna be good. To note, in this episode, Dustin gives the name Demodogs to what he thinks Dart is, so when referring to those slimy dudes, that's what I'm gonna call them.
Demogorgon. Dogs. Demodogs. It's like a compound.
So the Demodogs have come out of the hole and managed to break their way through the glass, and they send the workers scattering. Hopper and Dr. Owens take the stairs while the rest of the workers take the elevator, which was a bad choice on their part because they all end up dead. Chaos then ensues as these Demodogs take over the lab, and Mike realizes there's really only one thing they can do at this moment. He says they have to put Will to sleep because he's a spy, and if Will knows where they are, then so does the shadow monster. Possessed Will, of course, says Mike is lying and tries anything he can do to fight getting drugged, but Joyce eventually realizes she has to and drugs Will, just as Hopper and Dr. Owens arrive. They grab Will and run from the Demodogs and lock themselves in the control room where they see just how bad the damage is on all those TVs and cameras. Then the power conveniently goes out. Meanwhile, Steve, Dustin, Lucas, and Max are having their Stand By Me moment walking along the train tracks. Dustin is saying he was sure that Dart was at the junkyard because of the yellow pattern on his butt, and Steve ends up spilling the beans that Dart ate Muse the cat. R.I.P. Muse, another one gone too soon. Lucas is now mad that Dustin kept Dart and lied about it. They start arguing over who had the bigger offense, whether it was lying about Dart or telling the truth to a stranger, that stranger being Max, and that's because the golden rule obviously is friends don't lie. Steve is somehow able to hear something over the kids' obnoxious fighting, and it's the squeals of the Demodogs, and they see that it's coming from the lab. Jonathan and Nancy arrive to the lab and notice something's weird because the power is out and the gate won't open. Nancy then hears rustling from the woods, and naturally that means run towards it, right? Thankfully, it just ends up being Steve and his misfit kids. Back in the control room at the lab, Dr. Owens locates the nearest exit on a map, but he says that since there's a power outage, the building is now on lockdown, so someone has to reset the breakers 3 floors down. Hopper volunteers to do it, but then Bob points out that resetting the breakers isn't all that has to be done, and he volunteers to go down since he's the only one that knows how to code in BASIC, reprogram the computers, and reset the alarms. Hopper gives Bob a radio and a quick gun tutorial as he tells Hopper to not wait for him just to get the others out. Superhero Bob then makes his way to the basement, resets the breakers, and unlocks the doors, the gates, and even sets off the sprinklers to reroute some Demodogs. He however leaves leaves his gun behind when he leaves the basement, which is an immediate sign that poor Bob is doomed. Dr. Owens then tells Hopper, Joyce, and Mike to take Will and run for the doors. He's going to stay behind and guide them on the radio so they can get out safely. This might be one of the first nice things Dr. Owens has done this whole show. They make it outside, but of course Joyce goes back inside to wait for Bob. Now after a close call with a demodog, Bob makes it into the lobby, so close to the front doors and almost able to reach out to Joyce, but he stops and stares at Joyce. They make googly eyes at each other, and it ends up being a freaking distraction, and the demodogs come busting through and feed on Bob like he is the last drop of water at the desert, the last piece of pizza at a fraternity. Those are horrible analogies, but you get what I mean, right? Hopper ends up having to pull Joyce out of the building, and as they run outside, Jonathan pulls up to pick them up just in time. They all then drive back to pick up the rest of the kids, and pretty sure no one closed the gate here. Don't you want to lock those demodogs in? Although actually that gate would not stand a chance with them, right? Because they're going through tunnels, yeah. Stupid, Lisa, stupid. Everyone is now back at the Byers' house and feeling down, and Hopper tries to call for military backup. Mike tries to cheer everyone up by letting them know that Bob was the original founder of the Hawkins AV Club and taught Mr. Clark everything he knows, and they can't let him die in vain, so they really have to take the Shadow Monster down. He then has a realization that the Demodogs are the Shadow Monster's army, and the Shadow Monster is the brain connected to the tunnels, the Demodogs, and the Upside Down. Dustin then puts his Dungeons & Dragons knowledge to good use, saying that the Shadow Monster is like the Mind Flayer, the namesake of this episode. Now in the game, the Mind Flayer is a monster from an unknown dimension so ancient it doesn't even know its true home, so it wanders around enslaving races in other dimensions by taking over their brains using its psionic powers. Basically tries to wipe everybody out to become the master race. Mike knows that there's only one person who knows how to destroy the Mind Flayer, and that is Will, so they need to be able to talk to Will. But the only way they can do that is to find a place where he doesn't know the location, so the Mind Flayer can't find out where they are. They cover the inside of the shed with tarps, foil, cardboard, everything to make it look like somewhere else. They even set up huge big lights like it's an interrogation room, and they sit Will down in it. They wake Will up and he has no idea where he is, so it's working so far, but he then throws a tantrum telling them to untie him. Joyce knows that Will is still inside there somewhere, so she starts to tell a story about his 8th birthday. Then Jonathan and Mike also tell Will stories. This all seems to calm Will down, but once the stories stop, the Mind Flayer takes over and Will yells to let him go, and Hopper notices that Will's hand is tapping, and he realizes it's Morse code, so it's a good thing Hopper is an expert there. The message translates to the word here, and they know that the Mind Flayer hasn't fully taken over Will, so Joyce, Mike, and Jonathan go back and tell Will even more stories, and Hopper continues to relay the codes back to the kids in the house, and they discover another message. Close gate. Is this related to the gate back at the lab that the group forgot to close when they left? Nope. No, Lisa, you already established that that gate could not keep any supernatural out. It relates to the gate to the Upside Down at the bottom of the lab that is still a big gaping hole. The phone in the house then rings and Will hears it, and now he knows where he is, so Joyce has to drug him, but it's a little too late because the Demodogs have been called for. The group arm themselves, and it's kind of cute that Lucas thinks his slingshot can take on a Demodog, and the same with Mike and that candlestick. As the Demodog gets close, they hear it squeal, and all of a sudden it gets thrown through the window and it's dead. The door then starts to unlock, and of course it's Eleven arriving just in time to save the day. At first, part of me thought it could be Billy arriving. Maybe he hit the Demodog with his car and now he's banging on the door. But once those locks started to move, you knew it had to be 11, and she walks in rocking her brand new gothic look. Well, that wraps up my favorite episode of the season so far, and it's kind of heartbreaking to me that there's only one left. Like, I kind of don't want it to end. We finally know that the Shadow Monster is the Mind Flayer and is pretty much spreading to take over and build a home. They still have to figure out just how to kill it though, and it's still inside Will, so even if Will gives them the info they need, is he going to survive the process? Maybe now that 11 is here, it will all become clear and they'll be able to stop it. We obviously know she can open gates, so can she close it? We'll have to wait until the next episode for those answers, but before I get to that, here's some lines that just made me chuckle and some of my favorite moments from the episode.
Dart ate a cat.
No. What? No.
Fine. How do I do that?
You can't. Not unless you know basic.
I don't know what that means.
All right, teach it to me.
Shall I teach you French while I'm at it, Jim? How about a little German? How about you, Doc? You speak basic?
No. Let me try.
No. Let me try, Jonathan. Yeah.
Son of a bitch. You know what?
God, none of this is real. This is a kid's game.
No, it's a manual, and it's not for kids. And unless you know something that we don't, this is the best metaphor.
Analogy.
Analogy. That's what you're worried about. To Fine. Conquer us, basically. You know, it believes it's the master race.
Like the Germans.
The Nazis. You summon an undead army because zombies, you know, they don't have brains, and the Mind Flayer it likes brains. It's just a game.
And with that, it wraps up this video recap. It is now time for me to go watch the finale and kind of get a little sad that the show is over and that we have to wait another year for another season, probably. But until then, you can check out my other Stranger Things recaps in case you missed an episode, or I'm going to put up a video here after I finish the finale of, you know, unanswered questions, theories for season 3, that kind of stuff. It'll all be right there. Until then, I'm out.